Thousands of years ago, someone carved symbols into stone that no one can read today. Someone built monuments so precise they seem impossible. Someone buried treasures that have never been found, left messages that have never been understood, and vanished without leaving any explanation. The past is full of questions that have no answers. Tonight, we wander through ancient mysteries that still puzzle historians. These are the riddles carved in stone, the secrets buried beneath sand and sea, the lost stories that time itself seems to have forgotten. Welcome to Drowsy Discovery. Over the next 2 hours, over 100 gentle facts will carry you through the unexplained wonders of the ancient world. There is nothing to memorize, nothing to remember. Just listen and let your mind drift. Have you ever wondered what secrets the ancients took to their graves? You are not alone. If these quiet mysteries bring you a moment of peace, consider sharing this journey with someone who might need rest tonight. Now let your shoulders soften. Let the weight of the day begin to lift. If you are lying down, feel the surface beneath you holding you steady. There is nowhere else you need to be. Let us begin. The Great Pyramid of Giza was the tallest building on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. Rising from the desert plateau like a monument to human ambition, the Great Pyramid held the record as the tallest structure ever built for almost 4 millennia. From its completion around 2,500 years before the Common Era, until the spire of Lincoln Cathedral surpassed it in the 14th century. At its original height of nearly 147 meters, the pyramid would have gleamed white in the sunlight, a beacon visible for miles across the Nile Valley, and even today, diminished by time and the loss of its outer casing stones, it remains among the most massive buildings ever constructed by human hands. No written records survive explaining exactly how it was built. The pyramid keeps all its secrets in stone. No one knows exactly how the pyramids were built. For centuries, scholars and engineers have debated how the ancient Egyptians managed to transport, shape, and lift the roughly 2.3 million stone blocks that make up the Great Pyramid, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, using only the technology available 4,500 years ago, with no iron tools, no wheeled vehicles capable of bearing such loads, and no cranes or pulleys in the designs we recognize today. Theories range from massive ramps spiraling up the pyramid's sides to internal passageways that allowed blocks to be moved from within, from water-lubricated causeways to counterweight systems that have left no trace in the archaeological record, and none of these ideas has been proven beyond doubt. Perhaps a combination of methods worked together. We may never know the full truth. The limestone blocks of the Great Pyramid fit together with astonishing precision. The joints between the massive limestone blocks of the Great Pyramid are so finely cut that in many places you cannot slip a piece of paper between them, a level of precision that continues to astonish engineers who study the structure today, particularly when you consider that these blocks were shaped using copper tools and abrasive sand, rather than the hardened steel or diamond-tipped equipment we would use for such work now. Some researchers believe the Egyptians achieved this precision through careful grinding, rubbing the faces of the blocks together with sand until they matched perfectly, while others suggest the use of liquid mortar that settled into any tiny gaps, but the exact techniques remain a matter of debate. The result speaks for itself across the millennia. Precision carved in silence. The Great Pyramid was originally covered in smooth white limestone casing stones. When the Great Pyramid was completed, its rough-stepped surface was hidden beneath a shell of highly polished white limestone quarried from Tura, across the Nile. And these casing stones transformed the pyramid into a gleaming beacon that would have reflected sunlight so brightly It could be seen from miles away, a radiant and gleaming mountain rising from the desert that must have seemed almost supernatural to those who beheld it. Most of these casing stones were stripped away over the centuries, carried off to build mosques, palaces, and other structures in Cairo after earthquakes loosened them from the pyramid's surface, though a few remain at the base where they give a glimpse of the pyramid's original splendor. Imagine it shining brightly under the noon sun, a man-made mountain of light. The pyramid's internal chambers contain shafts that point towards specific stars. Deep within the Great Pyramid, narrow shafts extend from the burial chambers toward the outer surface at precise angles, and these shafts align with particular stars that were significant in ancient Egyptian religion, including the constellation Orion, associated with Osiris, the god of the dead, and the star Sirius, linked to Isis, his consort. Whether these shafts served a purely symbolic purpose, intended to guide the pharaoh's soul to the heavens, or whether they had some practical function in the construction or ventilation of the tomb, remains uncertain, but their precise alignment suggests that whoever designed the pyramid possessed remarkable astronomical knowledge and took great care to incorporate it into the structure's very bones. The stars were mapped in stone. The heavens were built into the walls. Stonehenge was built in stages over a period of about 1,500 years. The monument we call Stonehenge was not the work of a single generation or even a single culture, but rather a project that evolved over roughly 15 centuries, beginning around 3,000 years before the Common Era with a simple circular ditch and bank, developing through phases that saw the erection of timber posts, the placement of the famous bluestones transported from Wales, and finally, the raising of the massive sarsen stones that dominate the site today. Each phase may have had different purposes and meanings for the people who built it, and the monument itself may have changed its function over time, serving perhaps as a burial ground, a place of healing, a temple to the sun or the ancestors, or all of these across its long history. Stonehenge grew slowly across generations. It remembers more than we can know. And from these ancient stones raised toward the sky, we now turn to monuments scattered across the earth, whose purposes remain unknown. The bluestones of Stonehenge were transported from Wales, over 200 miles away. Among the most puzzling aspects of Stonehenge is the origin of its bluestones, the smaller inner ring of stones that weigh several tons each and have been traced through geological analysis to the Preseli Hills in Wales, more than 200 miles from the Wiltshire Plain where Stonehenge stands, a journey that would have been extraordinarily difficult for a Neolithic people without wheeled vehicles or draft animals capable of moving such loads. How exactly they transported these stones remains vigorously debated, with theories ranging from sledges and rollers over land to rafts along the coast and up rivers, and some researchers even suggest glacial transport, though the most recent evidence points to deliberate human effort. Why they chose these particular stones from such a distant place adds another layer to the mystery. The bluestones were worth the journey. No one knows for certain why Stonehenge was built. Despite more than a century of archaeological investigation, the true purpose of Stonehenge remains elusive, with theories suggesting it served as an astronomical observatory tracking the movements of the sun and moon, a temple for ancestor worship where cremated remains of the dead were interred, a place of healing where the sick came seeking cures attributed to the bluestones, or a unifying monument that brought together communities from across ancient Britain for seasonal gatherings and ceremonies. The truth may be that Stonehenge served multiple purposes across its long history, its meaning shifting as the beliefs and needs of its builders evolved over 1,500 years of construction and use. Perhaps it was all of these things at once. Perhaps its meaning has been lost with the people who understood it. The Nazca lines in Peru are enormous geoglyphs, visible only from the air. Scratched into the reddish pebbles of the Peruvian desert are hundreds of lines, shapes, and figures so vast that they can only be fully appreciated from high above, some stretching for kilometers across the landscape, depicting animals like hummingbirds and spiders and monkeys, alongside geometric spirals and straight lines that run arrow-true toward the horizon. Created by the Nazca people between roughly 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, these geoglyphs were made simply by removing the darker surface stones to reveal the lighter ground beneath, a technique that required immense planning and coordination, but no advanced technology. Why they created images they themselves could never see in full remains one of the great questions of the ancient world. Perhaps the endless sky was their audience. Some Nazca lines depict animals, while others are simple geometric shapes. The Nazca lines include both figurative designs, recognizable depictions of creatures like monkeys, whales, lizards, and birds, some of which were native to the region, and some of which came from distant rainforests and oceans, and also abstract patterns, vast trapezoids and triangles and spirals and straight lines that seem to serve some other purpose entirely, perhaps marking paths for ritual processions, indicating underground water sources, or aligning with astronomical events like solstices and equinoxes. The most famous figures tend to be the animals, photographed from aircraft and reproduced on postcards around the world, but the geometric lines actually cover far more of the landscape and may have been more significant to the people who created them. Shapes without obvious meaning, messages we have not yet learned to read. The Nazca lines have survived for centuries because of the dry, windless climate. In a more typical environment, the Nazca lines would have eroded away within a few decades, their shallow grooves filled in by wind-blown sand or washed away by rain. But the Peruvian coastal desert is one of the driest places on Earth, receiving less than 20 millimeters of rainfall per year, and the lack of strong ground-level winds means the exposed lighter subsoil has remained undisturbed for over 1,500 years. This remarkable preservation is both a gift and a reminder of how precarious our connection to the past can be, for in any other landscape, these enormous figures would have vanished long before aeroplanes allowed us to see them from above. Modern tourism and climate change now threaten what thousands of years of natural forces could not destroy. The climate kept the drawings safe. The desert became their guardian. The Moai statues of Easter Island each weigh several tons. Scattered across the remote volcanic island of Rapa Nui in the Pacific Ocean stand nearly 900 Moai, monolithic human figures carved from compressed volcanic ash called tuff, most weighing between 10 and 82 tons, though the largest ever carved, which was never moved from the quarry, would have weighed around 270 tons if completed. These enormous statues were carved primarily with stone hand tools called toki, an immense labor that might have taken a team of carvers a year or more to complete, and their sheer size suggests they held profound significance for the Rapa Nui people, likely representing deified ancestors who watched over the villages from their platforms along the coast. The eyes of the Moai were originally inlaid with white coral and red stone pupils, giving them an even more powerful and watchful presence. Giants of stone facing inland, ancestors still keeping watch. The islanders moved the Moai without wheels or draft animals. One of the most difficult questions about the Moai is how the Rapa Nui people transported statues weighing tens of tons from the quarries where they were carved to the platforms around the island's coastline, a distance of up to 18 kilometers in some cases, without wheels, cranes, or horses or oxen to pull the weight. Oral traditions describe the statues as having walked to their destinations, and recent experiments suggest this may be closer to the truth than it sounds, with teams rocking the statues from side to side, using ropes attached to the head, pivoting them forward in a motion that resembles walking, a technique that explains both the tradition and certain patterns of damage found on statues that fell along ancient roads. They walked them across the island, stone giants taking careful and measured steps. And from these massive figures standing in silence, we turn to the written records of the past that remain locked in languages we cannot understand. Many Moai were toppled during conflicts on the island centuries ago. By the time European explorers arrived at Easter Island in the 18th century, many of the Moai had already been deliberately pushed from their platforms, cast face down onto the ground in acts that appear to have been linked to warfare between rival clans on the island, a period of conflict and resource scarcity that may have begun as early as the 16th century as the population outgrew the island's limited food and timber supplies. Toppling a rival clan's Moai would have been a powerful symbolic act, cutting off the protection of their ancestors and demonstrating dominance, and by the mid-19th century, nearly all the standing Moai had fallen. The statues that have been re-erected in modern times give visitors a glimpse of how impressive the island must have looked when hundreds of giants stood watching over the sea. Many have since been restored. Others still lie where they fell, faces pressed to the earth. The Voynich manuscript is a mysterious book that no one has ever decoded. Housed in Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book Library is a small handwritten volume dating to the early 15th century, written in an unknown script and filled with strange illustrations, that has resisted every attempt at decipherment by professional and amateur cryptographers alike for over a century, including codebreakers who cracked enemy communications during both world wars. Named after Wilfrid Voynich, the book dealer who acquired it in 1912, the manuscript contains roughly 240 pages of text that appears to follow the statistical patterns of a natural language, yet no one has identified what language it might be or whether the text conveys any meaning at all. Some believe it is an elaborate hoax. Others insist the secret is simply waiting for the right key. And as these mysteries settle around you, there is no need to solve them. Let each unanswered question drift past like a cloud. Take a slow breath if you wish, and feel your body growing a little heavier, a little more at ease. The Voynich manuscript contains illustrations of strange plants that do not exist. Among the most peculiar features of the Voynich manuscript are its botanical illustrations, hundreds of drawings of plants that at first glance resemble the herbal manuscripts of the medieval period, yet on closer examination depict species that cannot be identified with any known flora, their roots, leaves, and flowers combining elements in ways that seem to come from imagination rather than observation. As if the artist were describing the plants of a dream rather than the vegetation of any real landscape. Various researchers have tried to match these illustrations to rare plants from the Americas, Central Asia, or even entirely imaginary botanical specimens, suggesting the manuscript might document species unfamiliar to European scholars or perhaps invent them entirely, but no consistent identifications have been accepted by the wider academic community. The plants remain nameless. Their strange garden exists only in these pages. The manuscript script appears to follow linguistic patterns, but no one can read it. Statistical analysis of the Voynich manuscript's text reveals patterns consistent with a natural language, including word frequencies that follow Zipf's law, a mathematical relationship observed in all known human languages, and character combinations that suggest vowels and consonants rather than random noise. Yet these encouraging signs have not led to any breakthrough in translation, and some researchers now suggest the text might be a constructed language. An early example of automatic writing or even meaningless glyphs carefully arranged to mimic the appearance of genuine communication. The debate continues among linguists and cryptographers, with new claims of decipherment appearing regularly, though none has gained widespread acceptance from the scholarly community. Computer algorithms and artificial intelligence have been applied to the problem, yet the manuscript continues to guard its secrets stubbornly. The script imitates meaning. Whether meaning hides within remains unknown. The Phaistos disc from Crete is covered in symbols that have never been deciphered. Discovered in 1908 at the Palace of Phaistos on the island of Crete, this fired clay disc, roughly 15.5 centimeters in diameter, bears 242 impressed symbols arranged in a spiral pattern on both sides. And despite more than a century of study, no one has been able to determine what language the symbols represent or what message the disc was meant to convey. The symbols were apparently made with stamps or punches, suggesting a form of early printing, yet no other examples of this script have ever been found anywhere in the world, leaving scholars without the comparative material needed to decode it. A single text in a lost language, one disc holding a deep secret it will not share. Linear A is an ancient script from the Minoan civilization that remains unreadable. Before the arrival of Greek-speaking peoples on Crete, the Minoan civilization developed its own writing system known to scholars as Linear A, used primarily for administrative and religious purposes between roughly 1800 and 1400 years before the Common Era. And despite the successful decipherment of its descendant script Linear B in the 1950s, Linear A itself has resisted all attempts to read it. Largely because we do not know what language lies behind the symbols and have no bilingual text to serve as a Rosetta Stone. The tablets we have recovered appear to record inventories, offerings, and accounts, bureaucratic documents whose precise meanings remain locked away in silence. Without knowing the language behind the script, even the most careful analysis of symbol patterns cannot unlock the actual words the Minoans intended to convey. The Minoans kept their records carefully. We can only watch them without understanding. The Rongorongo script of Easter Island has defied all attempts at translation. Carved into wooden tablets found on Easter Island is a remarkable script known as Rongorongo, consisting of intricate symbols that appear to alternate direction from line to line in a pattern called reverse boustrophedon. Yet despite intensive study, since the tablets were first collected in the 1860s, no one has been able to decipher the script, in part because fewer than 30 examples survive, many of them damaged. And there are no living speakers of the language the script may have recorded. The last natives who could read Rongorongo are believed to have died or been taken into slavery in the mid-19th century, and with them went the knowledge of what these symbols meant. The tablets remain. The voices that could once read them are gone. And from scripts that guard their secrets, we turn to cities that vanished, leaving only ruins and riddles behind. Proto-Elamite is one of the oldest undeciphered writing systems in the world. Among the earliest known writing systems, Proto-Elamite emerged in what is now southwestern Iran around 3,200 years before the Common Era, roughly contemporary with the earliest Mesopotamian scripts. Yet, while cuneiform was eventually deciphered through painstaking effort, Proto-Elamite has stubbornly resisted all attempts at reading. Its approximately 1,700 surviving tablets filled with symbols that seem to record administrative or economic information, but convey no meaning we can currently understand. The script appears to have been used for only a brief period, perhaps a few hundred years, before being completely abandoned, and no bilingual texts have been found that might provide a key to its interpretation. It was one of humanity's first experiments with writing. Then it simply vanished, leaving only mysterious clay tablets behind. The Indus Valley script appears on thousands of artifacts but has never been read. The Indus Valley Civilization, one of the great urban cultures of the ancient world that flourished over 4,000 years ago, left behind thousands of small seals, tablets, and pottery fragments inscribed with a script of approximately 400 distinct symbols. Yet, despite nearly a century of intensive academic study and countless attempts at decipherment, no convincing translation has emerged. And scholars continue to debate whether the inscriptions represent a true language or perhaps a system of symbols without phonetic content. The brevity of the inscriptions, most containing fewer than 5 characters, makes statistical analysis extremely difficult, and the lack of any bilingual text or surviving descendant language leaves researchers with few tools to prise open the mystery. The Indus people built great and complex cities. Their words remain silent. The lost city of Atlantis has been sought for over 2,000 years. Ever since the Greek philosopher Plato first described Atlantis in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias around 360 years before the Common Era, explorers, scholars, and dreamers have searched for traces of this fabled island civilization, proposing locations as diverse as the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, Antarctica, and the Mid-Atlantic. Yet no credible archaeological evidence has ever been found to confirm that Atlantis was anything more than a philosophical parable invented to illustrate moral and political lessons. The search continues nonetheless, fueled by the tantalizing specificity of Plato's description and the eternal human longing for lost golden ages hidden beneath the waves. Each generation seems to produce new theories about where Atlantis might lie, none of which have ever yielded definitive proof. Whether myth or memory, Atlantis endures. Its mysterious waters never seem to stop calling. Plato described Atlantis as a powerful civilization destroyed in a single day. In Plato's account, Atlantis was a wealthy and technologically advanced island empire that grew arrogant and attempted to conquer the Mediterranean world, only to be defeated by the virtuous Athenians and then destroyed by the gods in a single day and night of violent earthquakes and devastating floods, sinking beneath the sea and vanishing from history forever. This dramatic and vivid narrative has led some researchers to search for real historical disasters, such as the volcanic destruction of Thera or the catastrophic flooding of the Black Sea basin, that might have inspired the legend, while others maintain that Plato invented the entire story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and reckless imperial overreach. One catastrophe, one terrible day, an empire swallowed entirely by the sea. The city of Pompeii was preserved beneath volcanic ash for nearly 2,000 years. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 of the Common Era, it buried the Roman city of Pompeii beneath a blanket of volcanic ash and pumice so complete that the city was preserved almost exactly as it had been at the moment of disaster, with food still in the pots, frescoes bright on the walls, and the shapes of the dying frozen in the final positions of their bodies. A time capsule that lay hidden until its chance discovery in the 16th century and systematic excavation beginning in the 18th. The tragedy that killed thousands of Roman citizens also created one of the richest and most informative archaeological sites in the world. A disaster became an unexpected gift to future generations, a buried city waiting patiently to be found. El Dorado, the legendary city of gold, has never been found. Spanish conquistadors and later European explorers spent many centuries searching the dense rainforests and rugged mountains of South America for El Dorado, the legendary city said to be lavishly paved with gold and ruled by a king who covered himself in gleaming gold dust before ritually washing in a sacred lake. Yet despite countless dangerous expeditions that cost the lives and treasure of many adventurers, no such city was ever discovered. And historians now believe the legend arose from a misunderstanding of the actual ritual practices of the Muisca people of Colombia, who did indeed cast golden offerings into Lake Guatavita as part of their sacred ceremonies. The lake itself has been partially drained several times, and gold objects have indeed been recovered from its muddy bottom. The gold was real. The city was a golden dream that ultimately consumed those who chased it. The Amber Room, once called the eighth wonder of the world, disappeared during the Second World War. Constructed in the early 18th century for the King of Prussia, the Amber Room was a dazzling chamber decorated with 6 tons of amber panels backed with gold leaf and mirrors, a masterpiece of Baroque craftsmanship that was given to Russia and installed in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, where it was admired for over 2 centuries before being dismantled by German soldiers during the Second World War and shipped to Königsberg. When the city fell in 1945, the Amber Room vanished completely, and despite decades of searching, no trace of the original panels has ever been conclusively found, leading to theories of destruction, hidden bunkers, and sunken ships. A room made of fossilized sunlight, lost somewhere in the terrible chaos of war. And from treasures lost to time and war, we turn to ancient objects whose craftsmanship defies what we thought possible. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon may never have existed at all. Listed among the celebrated 7 wonders of the ancient world, the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon were vividly described by Greek and Roman writers as a spectacular terraced paradise of exotic trees, rare flowers, and flowing water rising improbably from the desert plains of ancient Mesopotamia, said to have been built by King Nebuchadnezzar for his homesick wife, who longed for the green hills of her homeland. Yet no Babylonian texts mention such a garden. No archaeological evidence of its structure has been found, and some scholars now believe the gardens may have been either entirely legendary or perhaps confused with royal gardens in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, a wonder of the ancient world that may have existed only in stories. Sometimes the imagination creates what the real world cannot. The Library of Alexandria held untold knowledge that was lost forever. Founded in the 3rd century before the Common Era under the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt, the Library of Alexandria was widely considered the greatest and most comprehensive repository of knowledge in the ancient world, housing hundreds of thousands of scrolls containing the accumulated wisdom and learning of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and other civilizations. And its destruction, whether by fire, neglect, or gradual decline over centuries, represents one of history's most mourned losses. We cannot know what brilliant scientific insights, literary masterpieces, or historical records vanished with the scrolls that turned to ash or crumbled to dust, leaving gaps in our understanding of the ancient world that can never be filled. The library collected the world's wisdom. Time and violence eventually took it all back. The Antikythera mechanism is an ancient Greek device that predicted celestial events. Recovered from a Roman shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901, this corroded lump of bronze gears was eventually revealed to be a sophisticated mechanical device capable of calculating the positions of the sun, moon, and planets, predicting eclipses, and tracking the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games, a level of technological complexity not seen again until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe more than 1,000 years later. Who designed and painstakingly built the mechanism remains unknown, as does the question of whether it was a unique masterpiece or one of many such devices that have been lost to time. Some scholars believe it may have been created by a school of astronomers on the island of Rhodes, though this attribution remains uncertain. A machine for predicting the heavens, gears that silently and precisely measured the movement of the stars. The Antikythera mechanism is sometimes called the first analog computer. With its intricate system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, the Antikythera mechanism performed calculations that would otherwise have required laborious mathematical work, mechanically modeling the motions of celestial bodies based on the astronomical knowledge of its time. And in this sense, it functioned very much like the analog computers of the 20th century that used mechanical or electrical components to solve mathematical problems before digital technology replaced them. The discovery that such sophistication existed in the ancient world has forced scholars to revise their understanding of Greek technological capability, suggesting that the philosophical and mathematical achievements of the classical world extended into practical engineering far more than previously believed. The mechanism demonstrates that theoretical knowledge of astronomy was translated into working machinery with remarkable precision, a computer made of bronze. Ancient gears still turning in our imagination. The Baghdad battery may have been used to generate small electrical currents. Found near Baghdad in the 1930s, a small clay jar containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod has been dubbed the Baghdad battery by those who believe it was an ancient device for generating electricity, perhaps for electroplating gold onto silver objects. And experiments have shown that when filled with an acidic solution like vinegar or grape juice, similar jars can produce a small voltage. Most archaeologists remain skeptical, suggesting the jars may simply have been containers for storing scrolls or other objects, but the possibility that some ancient craftsmen stumbled upon the principles of galvanic cells continues to fascinate those who look for lost technologies in the distant past. A jar, some metal, and acid, perhaps a bright spark 2,000 years old. Roman concrete has lasted for 2,000 years, while modern concrete often crumbles. The Romans built structures of concrete that have survived for 2 millennia, including the Pantheon's unreinforced dome and harbor structures submerged in seawater that resist deterioration, while many modern concrete buildings and bridges begin to crumble within a few decades, prompting scientists to investigate what made Roman concrete so durable. Recent analysis has revealed that the Romans used volcanic ash called pozzolana mixed with lime in proportions that allow the concrete to strengthen over time through chemical reactions with seawater and rainwater, a remarkable self-healing property that modern engineers are now trying to replicate in contemporary construction projects. The exact recipes varied depending on the intended use, with harbor structures requiring different mixtures than buildings on land. The Romans built structures meant to endure for centuries. Their concrete outlived their empire and continues to teach us still. The Damascus steel of ancient swords contained carbon nanotubes that modern science only recently understood. For centuries, swords forged from Damascus steel were prized for their exceptional sharpness, flexibility, and distinctive watered pattern on the blade. Yet the technique for producing this steel was lost around the 18th century, and only in recent decades have scientists using electron microscopes discovered that the metal contained carbon nanotubes and cementite nanowires. Structures that contributed to its legendary properties but were created by ancient smiths without any understanding of the nanoscale chemistry involved. How medieval craftsmen stumbled upon processes that produced such advanced materials remains somewhat mysterious, likely involving specific impurities in the ore and precise temperature control during forging. The secret died with the smiths who perfected it, and modern metallurgists are still trying to recreate the exact conditions that produced these remarkable blades. A blade sharper than its makers could explain. science hidden deep in the steel. And from techniques lost and rediscovered, we turn to the great builders whose methods still baffle engineers today. Greek fire was a Byzantine weapon whose exact formula has been lost. In naval battles across the Mediterranean Sea, Byzantine warships deployed a terrifying weapon called Greek fire, a flaming liquid that could be sprayed at enemy vessels through bronze tubes mounted on the prows and would continue to burn even on water, clinging to ships and sailors alike and spreading unquenchable destruction wherever it touched. The formula was a closely guarded state secret, known only to the imperial family and a select few trusted craftsmen. And when Constantinople finally fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, the knowledge died with the empire, leaving historians to speculate about what combination of petroleum, quicklime, sulfur, or other ingredients might have created such a devastating incendiary weapon. Modern researchers have attempted to recreate Greek fire based on historical descriptions, but none have achieved the same terrifying effectiveness described in ancient accounts. An empire's weapon, a secret that burned and then went cold. The builders of the pyramids used copper tools to cut granite, a much harder stone. One of the most enduring puzzles of pyramid construction is how the ancient Egyptians managed to cut and shape granite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, using tools made primarily of copper, a relatively soft metal that should wear away quite quickly against such extremely resistant material. The answer appears to involve extraordinary patience and abrasion, with copper tools carefully used to guide sand or powdered stone against the granite surface, the harder particles doing the actual cutting while the copper served merely as a holder. But the immense effort required to work granite in this way only deepens our respect for the builders' remarkable determination and skill. Soft tools shaping hard stone. Patience and persistence became their sharpest edge. The massive stones of Sacsayhuaman in Peru fit together without mortar. High in the Andes above the ancient city of Cusco stands a massive fortress of immense dry-fitted blocks, some with as many as 12 angles, cut so precisely that no mortar was needed to hold them in place, and fitted so tightly that even after 5 centuries of powerful earthquakes, a piece of paper cannot be slipped between the stones. How the Inca achieved this extraordinary level of precision without iron tools or written architectural plans continues to puzzle modern engineers, with theories ranging from careful shaping through patient grinding to the use of wooden templates and communal labor organized by the state's sophisticated administrative systems. The fortress took decades to build and employed thousands of workers brought from across the empire. The stones locked together like puzzle pieces. A puzzle that took an entire empire years to solve. Some stones at Sacsayhuaman weigh over 100 tons. The largest of the megalithic blocks at Sacsayhuaman are estimated to weigh between 100 and 200 tons, quarried from sources several kilometers away, and somehow transported up steep and rugged mountain terrain to be set in place with perfect precision. A feat that would be challenging even for modern heavy equipment, and was accomplished by the Inca without wheels, draft animals, or cranes. Archaeologists believe vast labor forces used levers, ramps, ropes, and rolling logs, but recreating such an effort remains largely theoretical, and the sheer audacity of moving such immense weights leaves visitors stunned when they stand beneath the walls and look up at what human ambition can achieve. The fortress served both military and ceremonial purposes, its walls zigzagging across the hillside like the teeth of a great stone serpent, mountains moved by human hands. Stones that remember the strength it took. The ancient Romans built roads that are still in use today. At the height of the Roman Empire, a network of over 400,000 kilometers of roads connected distant provinces from Britain to North Africa and from Spain to Mesopotamia, many built with such careful and methodical engineering, with multiple layers of sand, gravel, and stone on solid foundations with proper drainage, that sections remain walkable or even drivable 2,000 years later, outlasting the civilization that created them. These roads were designed not merely for travel, but for the rapid movement of legions and the efficient administration of a vast empire, yet their remarkable durability is a testament to builders who worked for permanence rather than mere convenience. Milestones placed along these roads marked distances and provided travelers with a sense of progress across vast territories. Rome built roads to last. Some roads are still patiently waiting to be used. The Lycurgus Cup changes color depending on how light passes through it. Housed in the British Museum is a 4th century Roman glass cup that appears jade green when lit from the front, but glows deep red when light shines through it from behind. And for decades no one understood how Roman craftsmen achieved this effect, until modern analysis revealed that the glass contains tiny particles of gold and silver, each around 70 nanometers in diameter, that scatter light in different ways depending on the angle. This is an example of nanotechnology created over 1,500 years ago, though almost certainly by accident rather than design, the result of skilled glassmakers working at the edge of their craft and stumbling upon colors they could not explain. A cup that changes with the light, ancient glass holding silver and gold dust. And as you rest here among these wonders of craftsmanship, let your mind simply wander. There is no need to understand how they were made. Let each mystery be a soft question without urgency, a riddle that invites rest rather than effort. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey predates Stonehenge by about 6,000 years. Carved stone pillars arranged in circles on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey mark the site of Göbekli Tepe, an extraordinary archaeological complex dated to around 9,500 years before the Common Era, making it roughly 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, and predating the construction of the Egyptian pyramids by 7 millennia, a discovery that has fundamentally and permanently altered our understanding of what Neolithic people were capable of creating. The site was not a permanent settlement, but appears to have been a place of ritual or communal gathering, suggesting that complex religious or social activity drove human organization even before the development of agriculture or permanent villages. Ongoing excavations continue to reveal new structures buried beneath the hill, and archaeologists believe only a fraction of the site has been uncovered so far. The oldest temple ever found, a place of worship long before there were cities. Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, not settled farmers. The traditional understanding of human development held that agriculture came first, providing the surplus food and stable population needed to support monumental construction projects. Yet Göbekli Tepe was built by people who still lived primarily by hunting wild animals and gathering wild plants, fundamentally challenging the long-held assumption that settled farming communities were necessary for complex civilization. The immense labor required to quarry, carve, and erect the massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing over 15 tons, would have demanded organization on a scale previously thought impossible without agriculture, suggesting that perhaps it was the desire to build sacred spaces that drove people to settle down and farm, not the other way around. This revolutionary idea has forced archaeologists to reconsider the entire sequence of human cultural development: faith before farming. The temple long before the settled village. The site was deliberately buried, and no one knows why. One of the most puzzling aspects of Göbekli Tepe is the evidence that around 8,000 years before the Common Era, the people who used the site deliberately and carefully buried the entire complex under tons of earth and rubble. preserving the stone pillars and carvings beneath an artificial hill that concealed them until their rediscovery in the 1990s. Why they chose to bury rather than abandon or destroy the site remains a mystery, with theories ranging from ritual closure at the end of the site's sacred function to deliberate preservation for future generations to an attempt to seal away powers that the builders had come to fear. They buried their temple on purpose. The Silent Hill kept its secret for 10,000 years. The carvings at Göbekli Tepe depict animals that no longer live in the region. The T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe are decorated with elaborate relief carvings of animals, including lions, aurochs, wild boar, foxes, snakes, spiders, scorpions, and various birds, many of which no longer inhabit the now arid landscape of southeastern Turkey, but would have roamed the lusher grasslands and forests that existed in the region during the final stages of the Ice Age. These carvings offer a glimpse of a lost ecosystem and the creatures that shared the world with the hunters who built the temple, a reminder that landscapes and climates change over millennia, and what we see today is not what our ancestors saw when they raised these stones. The artists captured their world in stone with remarkable skill and attention to detail. Animals carved in stone, memories of a world that slowly faded. The Longyu Caves in China were carved by hand in ways that remain unexplained. In 1992, a farmer draining water from ponds in Zhejiang Province, China, discovered an immense network of artificial caves carved into solid siltstone, with high ceilings, uniform chisel marks, and pillars supporting the roof, covering over 30,000 square meters of floor space. Yet no historical records mention their construction, and the estimated 1 million cubic meters of rock that was removed has never been found. The caves appear to date back over 2,000 years, possibly to the period before the Qin dynasty unified China, but their purpose remains unknown, with theories ranging from imperial tombs to military storage to some function we cannot imagine. The uniform chisel marks on the walls suggest a highly organized workforce following precise instructions rather than random individual labor. 1 million cubic meters of rock vanished, a project of immense labor, then silence. And from underground chambers carved in secrecy, we turn to ancient burials that hold their own unanswered questions. The Derinkuyu underground city could shelter 20,000 people. Beneath the Cappadocian region of central Turkey lies Derinkuyu, the largest and most impressive of several ancient underground cities carved into the soft volcanic rock known as tuff, with room for approximately 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food stores, providing a well-protected refuge during times of invasion or persecution, where entire communities could disappear below ground and wait out danger in safety. The city included ventilation shafts reaching the surface, wells providing fresh water, storage rooms, stables, churches, and even schools for children, and could be sealed from within using massive rolling stone doors that would block attackers even if they discovered the entrance tunnels above. Entire communities lived underground for months at a time during periods of danger, emerging only when the threat had passed. A city hidden beneath the earth. 20,000 people who could simply vanish beneath the ground. Derinkuyu extends 18 stories beneath the earth. The underground city of Derinkuyu descends approximately 85 meters into the volcanic rock, reaching an impressive depth equivalent to an 18-story building, with levels connected by narrow tunnels and staircases that were deliberately designed so they could be defended by small groups of armed inhabitants against invaders. A vertical labyrinth intended to disorient enemies while sheltering the inhabitants in its deepest and most protected chambers. The exact date of construction remains uncertain, with estimates ranging from the Phrygian period, around 800 years before the Common Era, to the Byzantine era, and the city may have been gradually expanded over many centuries as new threats required greater and deeper refuge underground. Similar underground cities exist throughout the Cappadocian region, connected by tunnels that stretch for kilometers beneath the surface. 18 stories carved downward into the rock. A world built in darkness for survival. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang contains a vast army of terracotta warriors. The first emperor of unified China, Qin Shi Huang, was buried around 210 years before the Common Era in an enormous tomb complex protected by an army of over 8,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, cavalry horses, and war chariots, each warrior individually and painstakingly sculpted with unique facial features, uniforms, and weapons, standing in formation as if ready to defend their emperor in the afterlife. Discovered by farmers digging a well in 1974, the Terracotta Army represents one of the most extraordinary archaeological finds of the 20th century and provides an unparalleled glimpse into the military organization and artistic achievement of the Qin dynasty. An army that never marched, soldiers made of clay standing eternal guard for eternity. The main burial chamber of Qin Shi Huang has never been opened. While the terracotta army that guards the approaches to Qin Shi Huang's tomb has been extensively excavated, the central burial mound itself, a man-made hill rising nearly 50 meters above the surrounding plain, has never been opened, and Chinese authorities have resisted calls to excavate the emperor's actual burial chamber, citing concerns that current technology cannot adequately preserve whatever treasures or artifacts might be found within. Ancient texts describe a tomb filled with wonders, including a model of the empire with rivers of flowing mercury representing the waterways, and the decision to leave it sealed keeps alive the possibility that we might someday see what has been hidden for over 2,000 years. Future generations with better preservation technology may finally unlock the secrets that lie within the burial mound. The emperor still rests undisturbed. His chamber waits in darkness. Ancient accounts describe rivers of mercury flowing through the tomb. The great historian Sima Qian, writing about a century after Qin Shi Huang's death, described an elaborate burial tomb chamber containing a miniature model of the entire empire, with rivers of flowing liquid mercury to represent the Great Yellow River and the Yangtze, and the ceiling painted or inlaid with precious stones to represent the heavens complete with constellations, a miniature cosmos built underground to accompany the emperor into eternity. For centuries, this vivid description was dismissed as poetic exaggeration, the kind of legendary embellishment that often surrounds the tombs of great rulers, until modern scientific testing revealed something remarkable that transformed legend into possible truth. The discovery reminds us that ancient accounts deserve more careful consideration than historians sometimes give them. The rivers of mercury may well have been real. Ancient chronicles, perhaps telling of something far stranger than fiction. High levels of mercury have been detected in the soil around the tomb mound. Scientific surveys of the soil around Qin Shi Huang's burial mound have detected mercury levels far higher than normal background concentrations, concentrated in distinctive patterns that suggest a large quantity of the liquid metal lies within the still unopened tomb, lending credence to Sima Qian's ancient account of mercury rivers flowing through a subterranean model of the empire. This discovery has added weight to calls to excavate the tomb, while simultaneously reinforcing arguments against disturbance, since the presence of mercury could pose dangers to archaeologists and create serious long-term preservation challenges for any artifacts exposed to air after 2,000 years of sealed darkness. Until technology advances enough to safely explore the chamber, the emperor's final secrets will remain locked away underground. The mercury is truly there. The ancient historian was indeed truly telling the truth. The tomb of Cleopatra has never been found. Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, died in 30 years before the Common Era, reportedly by suicide, and ancient sources say she was buried with her lover Mark Antony in a grand tomb she had constructed for herself in Alexandria. Yet despite many centuries of determined searching, no trace of this tomb has ever been found. The city of Alexandria has changed dramatically over 2 millennia, with ancient structures buried under modern buildings, sunken beneath the Mediterranean, or destroyed by earthquakes and rising sea levels, and Cleopatra's final resting place may lie beneath the streets or waters of the modern city, waiting patiently for some future discovery. Recent excavations at the Temple of Taposiris Magna have raised hopes that the tomb might finally be found nearby. The legendary queen sleeps somewhere. Alexandria carefully keeps its secret. And from tombs that may never be opened, we turn to enigmatic figures whose lives and deeds remain shrouded in legend. The tomb of Alexander the Great was visited for centuries, but is now lost. Alexander the Great died in Babylon in 323 years before the Common Era, and his carefully embalmed body was eventually taken to Alexandria in Egypt, where it was placed in a splendid marble tomb that became a pilgrimage site for rulers and generals for many centuries, visited by the famous Julius Caesar, Augustus, and other great figures of the ancient world who came to pay homage to the legendary Macedonian conqueror. Sometime after the 4th century of the Common Era, records of the tomb cease entirely, and despite extensive searching, its precise location has never been definitively identified, with theories placing it beneath the streets of modern Alexandria, under an early church, or lost entirely to the changes of time. A tomb that emperors visited. Now no one knows where it lies. Tutankhamun's tomb was unusually small for a pharaoh. When the British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun in November 1922, he found not the vast underground complex expected for an Egyptian pharaoh, but a relatively modest set of chambers. Possibly a tomb originally prepared for a high official and hastily adapted for the young king who died unexpectedly around the age of 19, after only a decade on the throne of Egypt. The small size may explain why the tomb escaped the remarkably systematic looting that emptied nearly every other royal burial in the Valley of the Kings, its entrance hidden beneath simple workers' huts and forgotten for over 3,000 years, until Carter's systematic search uncovered its sealed doorway. The treasures found within included over 5,000 objects, from golden masks to chariots to everyday items meant to accompany the king into eternity. A small and hidden tomb for a young king. Its very smallness became its protection. King Arthur may have been based on a real historical figure. The enduring and powerful legend of King Arthur, the noble and brave ruler who united Britain, founded the legendary Knights of the Round Table, and wielded the magical sword Excalibur, has captivated imaginations everywhere for well over 1,000 years. And while no definitive historical record confirms his existence, some scholars believe the legends may be rooted in memories of a real Romano-British or early medieval war leader who fought valiantly against invading Saxon armies in the 5th or 6th century. Whether this historical figure was actually named Arthur, whether he was a king or a military commander, and whether any specific battles attributed to him actually occurred remain matters of scholarly debate and ongoing imaginative speculation. A king forever wrapped in legend. Perhaps a memory, perhaps merely a dream. No contemporary records of King Arthur exist. Despite the vast body of literature, poetry, and legends surrounding King Arthur, no documents survive from his supposed lifetime in the 5th or 6th century that mention him by name. and the earliest references appear in texts written hundreds of years after the events they describe, leaving historians unable to separate genuine historical memory from later embellishment, invention, and romantic idealization. The earliest surviving mention of Arthur appears in a Welsh poem from around the 7th century, but detailed accounts of his reign, his knights, his quest for the Holy Grail, and his great deeds emerged only in the medieval period, by which time the historical kernel, if one ever existed, had long been buried under layers of myth and legend. We have legends but no records. The past knew him only through spoken stories. Robin Hood appears in ballads from medieval England, but his existence is unproven. The outlaw Robin Hood, who robbed from the rich, gave to the poor, and defied the corrupt sheriff of Nottingham from his hideout in Sherwood Forest, appears in English ballads and poems dating back to at least the 13th century, yet no definitive historical record confirms that such a person actually existed, and the name may represent a composite figure drawn from various outlaws and folk heroes of the medieval period. Court records mention several people called Robert Hood or Robin Hood in 13th and 14th century England, but none can be definitively linked to the legendary Archer of the Greenwood, and the long search for the real Robin Hood continues to yield more theories than certainties. An outlaw loved by common folk. Real or imagined, he became a powerful and enduring symbol. The identity of Jack the Ripper has never been confirmed. In the autumn of 1888, a series of brutal murders in the dark Whitechapel district of London terrified the public and gave rise to one of history's most famous unsolved mysteries, the identity of the killer known as Jack the Ripper, who was never caught and whose true name remains unknown despite more than a century of intensive investigation, speculation, and countless books proposing various suspects. The list of candidates has included a Polish immigrant, a royal physician, a painter, a prominent barrister, and even a member of the royal family, but no theory has gained universal acceptance, and the case remains officially open, a reminder that some mysteries endure even in an age of forensic science. Modern investigators have applied DNA analysis and criminal profiling techniques to the old evidence, yet the killer's identity remains frustratingly elusive. The Ripper was never found. Whitechapel still remembers its terrible fear. The man in the iron mask remains one of history's most enduring puzzles. For many decades in the late 17th century, a mysterious prisoner was held in various French fortresses under heavy guard, his face concealed behind a mask of black velvet, later embellished by romantic legend into iron, and his true identity kept so secret that even his own guards did not know who he was, inspiring centuries of speculation about what terrible crime or unfortunate circumstance had earned him this strange and perpetual anonymity. The most romantic theory suggests he was the secret twin brother of Louis XIV, hidden away to prevent a challenge to the throne, while other candidates include disgraced nobles, foreign spies, and even the true father of the Sun King himself. The mask hid everything. 300 long years later, we still cannot see his face. And from shadowy figures of history, we turn to events and disappearances that defy explanation. The true identity of Homer, who composed the Iliad and Odyssey, is debated. The Iliad and the Odyssey stand among the foundational works of Western literature, epic poems that have shaped storytelling, philosophy, and art for nearly 3,000 years. Yet we know almost nothing certain about their author Homer, if indeed there was a single author at all, with ancient accounts offering contradictory details and modern scholars debating whether the poems were truly the work of one genius poet, several generations of oral performers, or a later editor who compiled existing oral traditions into written form. Some historians have even questioned whether Homer was a real person or merely a legendary name attached to the oral tradition once the poems were finally committed to written form. The poems survived through the ages. The poet remains a distant shadow. The princes in the tower vanished in the 15th century and were never seen again. In 1483, the 12-year-old King Edward V and his younger brother Richard, Duke of York, were lodged in the Tower of London by their ambitious and cunning uncle, who soon seized the throne as Richard III, and the two boys were never seen again, their fate becoming one of England's most enduring and deeply haunting mysteries. With theories ranging from murder ordered by their uncle to escape abroad to death by natural causes to assassination by later claimants who feared their potential return and claim to the crown. When bones of two children were discovered beneath a tower staircase in 1674 during renovation work, they were assumed to be the princes and solemnly reburied in Westminster Abbey, though modern requests for DNA testing to confirm their identity have been consistently and repeatedly denied by church authorities. Two boys entered the tower. History lost them there. The lost colony of Roanoke left behind only the word Croatoan carved into a post. In 1587, over 100 English colonists established a settlement on Roanoke Island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. But when a supply ship returned 3 years later, the colony had vanished entirely, leaving no bodies, no signs of struggle, and only a single word, Croatoan, the name of a nearby island and its native inhabitants, carved into a wooden post. Whether the colonists were killed, absorbed into local tribes, died of disease, or attempted to sail away and were lost at sea has never been determined, and the fate of the lost colony of Roanoke remains one of the oldest and most haunting unsolved mysteries of American history. Archaeological searches and genetic studies continue to this day, yet none have provided conclusive answers about what truly happened to those early settlers. One word carved in wood, a colony swallowed by silence. The Tunguska event flattened millions of trees, but left no crater. On the morning of 30th June 1908, a tremendous explosion in the remote Siberian taiga near the Tunguska River flattened an estimated 80 million trees over an enormous area of more than 2,000 square kilometers, releasing energy equivalent to perhaps 10 to 15 megatons of explosive force, yet left no impact crater and no substantial fragments of whatever mysterious object caused the blast. The most widely accepted explanation is that a small asteroid or comet entered the atmosphere and exploded violently before reaching the ground, vaporizing completely in an airburst. But the extreme remoteness of the location meant scientific expeditions did not reach the site until nearly 20 years later, and questions about the exact nature of the impactor continue to this day. A forest laid flat, an explosion that left nothing behind. The Mary Celeste was found adrift with no crew aboard and no signs of struggle. In December 1872, the brigantine Mary Celeste was discovered drifting in the Atlantic Ocean between the Azores and Portugal with its sails partially set, its cargo of industrial alcohol intact, and no one aboard, the captain, his wife and daughter, and the 7 crew members having vanished without leaving any sign of what had happened to them. The single lifeboat was missing, suggesting an orderly abandonment, but why experienced sailors would leave a seaworthy vessel with ample supplies and no apparent danger remains a mystery that has inspired theories ranging from waterspouts and piracy to seaquakes and mutiny. The captain's log offered no clues, and personal belongings left behind suggested a sudden departure rather than a planned evacuation. The lonely ship sailed on without its crew. The sea kept its dark and cold secret. The Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers vanished with no explanation. When a relief vessel arrived at the Flannan Isles lighthouse, In the Outer Hebrides on Boxing Day 1900, the three keepers who should have been maintaining the light were gone. The lighthouse clock had stopped. The entrance gate and door were closed. Yet an untouched meal sat on the table, and two of the three sets of oilskins that should have protected the men from the harsh Atlantic weather were missing from their hooks. No bodies were ever found despite extensive searches of the rocky coastline, and theories have ranged from a rogue wave sweeping the men from the rocks during a storm to madness, murder, or even more fanciful supernatural suggestions. Three men on a lonely rock in the Atlantic. The light burned on without them. And as these vanishings and silences settle around you, let your own thoughts grow still. There is no need to search for answers tonight. Let your breathing slow. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let the unknown hold you gently. In 1930, an entire Inuit village in Canada disappeared without a trace. The remote village of Anjikuni Lake in northern Canada has been the subject of a persistent and chilling legend claiming that in 1930, a fur trapper arrived to find an entire settlement of Inuit people had completely vanished, leaving behind food still cooking over fires, valuable rifles that no hunter would ever abandon, and sled dogs that had starved to death tied to trees. Yet modern investigation has revealed that the story, while widely reported in newspapers, cannot be verified by contemporary records, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have no official files supporting such an event. The legend may have grown from exaggerated reports or complete fabrication, a reminder that not all mysteries are what they seem. A village that may never have vanished. A story that became its own enduring mystery. The disappearance of the Sodder children in 1945 has never been explained. On Christmas Eve 1945, a fire destroyed the Sodder family home in West Virginia, and while some of the 10 children escaped, 5 others, ranging in age from 5 to 14, were never seen again, their bodies never found in the ashes despite the family's insistence that the fire could not have been hot enough to completely consume human remains. Inconsistencies in the investigation and later reported sightings of children resembling the missing Sodders led the parents to believe their children had been kidnapped rather than killed, and they spent decades searching for answers that never came. The family even erected a billboard with photographs of the missing children that stood for years, asking anyone with information to come forward. 5 children lost to fire, or perhaps to something else. The embers cooled, but the mystery itself never did. The laid masks of Vintam Hill remain one of Brazil's strangest unsolved cases. In August 1966, the bodies of 2 Brazilian electronic technicians were found on Vintam Hill near Niterói, wearing formal suits and crude lead eye masks fashioned from sheets of metal. Beside them, a notebook containing cryptic handwritten instructions about ingesting capsules at a specific time and waiting for a signal that would never be explained. No obvious cause of death was ever determined despite autopsy attempts, and theories have ranged from UFO cult rituals to experiments with hallucinogenic drugs to contact attempts with extraterrestrial beings, none of which adequately explain why 2 apparently rational men would travel to a hilltop, put on lead masks, and die. The notebook they carried contained references to meeting with extraterrestrial beings at a specific time, adding to the deeply unsettling mystery. 2 men on a hillside, a mystery as strange and unsettling as any in modern recorded history. And from modern vanishings, we turn back to the ancient world's most persistent riddles and ritualistic secrets. The Bermuda Triangle has inspired countless theories, though most disappearances have mundane explanations. The Bermuda Triangle, a loosely defined region of the western Atlantic Ocean between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, has been blamed for the mysterious disappearance of ships and aircraft since the mid-20th century. inspiring theories involving alien abduction, underwater pyramids, time warps, methane eruptions from the seafloor, and electromagnetic anomalies. Yet careful analysis of the actual incidents reveals that most can be explained by human error, equipment failure, sudden and fierce tropical storms, and the simple fact that the Triangle is one of the most heavily trafficked shipping and flight routes in the world. The rate of disappearances in the area is not statistically unusual when compared to other busy maritime regions with similar weather patterns. Yet somehow the powerful legend persists, fed by sensational stories and our deep fascination with the unknown. The Triangle still keeps its reputation. The oracle at Delphi spoke prophecies that influenced kings and armies for centuries. For over 1,000 years, from roughly the 8th century before the Common Era until the decline of paganism in the 4th century of the Common Era, the sacred oracle at Delphi was the most important prophetic site in the entire ancient Greek world. Consulted by kings, generals, and ordinary citizens, alike seeking divine guidance on matters ranging from war and colonization to marriage and business. The priestess called the Pythia would enter a deep trance-like state, speak words that were interpreted by attending priests as the voice of Apollo, and her pronouncements shaped the course of empires, though they were often deliberately ambiguous enough to be understood in multiple ways. A woman speaking for a god, her mysterious words moved entire kingdoms and armies. Modern research suggests the oracle may have inhaled volcanic gases. For centuries, scholars dismissed ancient accounts of strange vapors rising from a chasm beneath the oracle's seat as mere poetic fancy. But detailed geological surveys conducted in the late 20th century revealed that two major fault lines intersect directly beneath the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, and that the underlying rock contains bituminous limestone capable of releasing gases like ethylene when heated by natural geothermal activity, gases that can produce lightheadedness, euphoria, and deep trance-like states when inhaled in enclosed spaces. This remarkable discovery suggests that the Pythia's prophetic trances may have had a chemical component, though it does not diminish the cultural and political significance of her pronouncements. Perhaps the gods spoke through geology. Perhaps the very earth itself quite naturally induced the visions. The Eleusinian mysteries were secret rituals that participants were forbidden to reveal. For nearly 2,000 years, from around 1,500 years before the Common Era until the sanctuary was destroyed by Christian authorities in the 4th century of the Common Era, initiates gathered at Eleusis near Athens to participate in deeply secret and sacred rites, honoring the goddesses Demeter and Persephone. Rituals so sacred that revealing their contents was punishable by death. And despite many thousands of initiates over the centuries, the details of what occurred during the mysteries were never fully disclosed and remain entirely unknown to this day. Ancient authors spoke in awe of the transformative experience, suggesting that initiates emerged with a changed understanding of life and death, but exactly what they saw or did to achieve this transformation died with the last generation of believers, a secret kept for 2,000 years. Even now, the silence holds. Initiates of the Eleusinian mysteries reportedly lost their fear of death. Those who underwent initiation at Eleusis, from humble farmers to Roman emperors like Marcus Aurelius, consistently reported that the experience fundamentally transformed their understanding of mortality, leaving them no longer afraid of death, because they had glimpsed something of what lay beyond. A claim so widespread and consistent across many centuries that it strongly suggests the rituals achieved a genuine psychological effect, whether through theatrical staging, carefully orchestrated symbolic drama, or perhaps the ingestion of substances that induced visionary experiences. Some careful modern researchers have suggested that a barley-based drink consumed during the rites may have been contaminated with ergot, a fungus with psychoactive properties, though this remains speculation. Whatever the method, the transformation was powerful enough that initiates returned to their ordinary lives fundamentally changed in their deepest beliefs. The initiates came out changed. Death itself had completely lost its terror. The Druids left no written records, so their beliefs remain largely unknown. The Druids of ancient Celtic Britain, Gaul, and Ireland served as priests, judges, teachers, and keepers of sacred knowledge, yet they transmitted their lore exclusively through oral tradition, deliberately and carefully avoiding writing to protect their precious mysteries, with the result that almost everything we know about them comes from Greek and Roman observers who may have misunderstood or distorted what they witnessed. Julius Caesar, who fought against Celtic peoples in Gaul, described Druidic beliefs in the immortality of the soul and their role in human sacrifice. But how much of this is accurate and how much is propaganda to justify conquest remains impossible to determine. The Druids kept their secrets in memory. When they died, all the knowledge went with them. The standing stones of Carnac in France number over 3,000. Stretching across the Breton landscape near the village of Carnac are more than 3,000 standing stones arranged in parallel rows that extend for over 4 kilometers, erected during the Neolithic period between roughly 4,500 and 3,300 years before the Common Era, making them contemporary with or even older than Stonehenge and the earliest pyramids. The stones range in size from small markers to monoliths standing over 4 meters tall, and their alignment in rows suggests careful planning and significant communal effort. Yet the civilization that raised them left no written records, and we can only speculate about what these vast stone avenues meant to those who walked among them. Thousands of stones in formation, a language we can no longer speak. And from rows of ancient stones, we turn to monuments raised in patterns that seem to speak of lost knowledge. The purpose of the Carnac stones is still debated by archaeologists. Theories about the purpose of the Carnac alignments range from astronomical observatories, carefully tracking the movements of the sun, moon, or stars, to processional avenues for religious ceremonies, to markers of territory and tribal boundaries, to burial grounds, to abstract representations of spiritual concepts we can no longer comprehend. And none of these interpretations has gained universal acceptance because the original Neolithic builders left no written or spoken explanation of their intentions. The stones stand in their ancient and silent rows, visited now by curious tourists and academic researchers rather than ancient worshippers, their meaning as obscure as the day they were rediscovered by modern scholars. Some stones have fallen over the centuries, while others were moved or damaged during early amateur excavations. 6,000 years of silence. The stones carefully remember what they will not tell. The Serpent Mound in Ohio was built by an ancient American culture. Winding for over 400 meters along a ridge in southern Ohio is the Great Serpent Mound, an earthwork effigy carefully depicting a snake with a curled tail and what may be an egg or the sun in its jaws, built by one of the indigenous cultures of ancient North America, though whether it was the Adena culture around 2,000 years ago or the Fort Ancient culture around 900 years ago remains debated. The mound appears to align with astronomical events such as the summer solstice sunset, suggesting a ceremonial or calendrical purpose, though its precise and original significance to its builders can only be guessed. The serpent's sinuous form stretches across the landscape with a grace that still impresses visitors who walk beside it today. A serpent made of earth, still patiently watching the endless sky for 1,000 years. The Gate of the Sun in Tiwanaku depicts a figure surrounded by symbols no one can read. Carved from a single block of andesite stone and standing at the ruins of the ancient city of Tiwanaku near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, the Gate of the Sun features elaborate relief carvings, including a central figure sometimes called the Staff God, surrounded by rows of winged attendants and geometric symbols that may represent a calendar, a religious text, or something we cannot imagine. Created by a civilization that flourished around the first millennium of the Common Era and collapsed before the rise of the Inca, the symbols have been studied for over a century, yet no consensus exists about what they mean or what language, if any, they represent. The central figure with its elaborate headdress and staff has inspired countless interpretations, from solar deity to founding ancestor to visiting celestial being. A gate that opens onto questions, symbols waiting to be understood. The Piri Rise map from 1513 appears to show coastlines that should not have been known. Compiled in 1513 by the Ottoman Admiral Piri Rise and rediscovered in 1929, this fragmentary world map includes surprisingly accurate depictions of the Atlantic coasts of Europe, Africa, and South America. Compiled from older source maps that Piri Rise claimed included a chart used by Christopher Columbus, leading some researchers to speculate that the map preserves knowledge from lost ancient civilizations or even depicts Antarctica before it was covered in ice. Most scholars, however, argue that the southern landmass is simply a distorted representation of South America or a conjectural southern continent, and that the map's accuracy, while impressive, does not require explanations beyond conventional cartography of the age. An old map raising new questions, coastlines carefully drawn before they were explored. The Vinland map has been debated as either genuine or a clever forgery. First revealed to the public in 1965 and claimed to date from the mid-15th century, the Vinland map appears to depict the northeast coast of North America, labeled Vinlanda Insula, as it was known to the Vikings who briefly settled there around the year 1000, which would make it the earliest surviving map to show any part of the Americas. However, scientific analysis of the ink has produced deeply contradictory results, with some tests suggesting modern titanium dioxide pigments that did not exist before the 20th century and others indicating medieval composition, leaving the authenticity of the unusual map in genuine doubt and its status as a treasure or a forgery unresolved. A map that might entirely rewrite history, or just a very clever trick on parchment. The Kensington runestone claims that Vikings reached Minnesota in the 14th century. In 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer working his land in Minnesota claimed to have found a large stone inscribed with runic text describing an expedition of Norsemen who reached the area in 1362, over an entire century before Columbus sailed to the Americas, a discovery that would dramatically rewrite the history of European exploration, if genuine. The stone quickly became a source of controversy, with some enthusiasts embracing it as proof of Viking journeys deep into the North American interior, while others dismissed it as a hoax, perhaps created by the farmer himself or by earlier Scandinavian settlers seeking to establish a stronger connection to the land. Linguistic analysis of the runic inscriptions has revealed irregularities that experts argue would not appear in genuine medieval Norse writing. A stone that tells an unlikely story, true forgotten history, or merely wishful thinking carved in rock. Most scholars believe the Kensington runestone is a modern hoax. Linguistic analysis of the runes carved on the Kensington stone has revealed grammatical forms and spellings that are inconsistent with 14th century Scandinavian usage as documented in authentic medieval inscriptions, suggesting the inscription was created by someone with imperfect knowledge of how medieval runes were actually used during that historical period. and the majority of chronologists and historians now consider it a 19th century forgery. Whether a deliberate fraud intended to deceive or perhaps an elaborate joke that took on a life of its own when people began believing it. Despite this scholarly consensus, true believers continue to argue that the stone is genuine, and it remains on display in a Minnesota museum where visitors can examine it and decide for themselves. Most experts say it is a forgery. The stone waits patiently in silence for its final verdict. And from contested artifacts and disputed journeys, we turn to strange discoveries that challenge our understanding of the past. The crystal skulls were once believed to be ancient Aztec artifacts. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, several life-sized human skulls carved with remarkable precision from clear quartz crystal appeared in private collections and prestigious museums across Europe and America, said to have been discovered in ancient temples in Mexico or Central America, and attributed to ancient Mesoamerican civilizations like the Aztecs or Maya, inspiring widespread legends of mystical powers and ancient esoteric knowledge carefully preserved in crystal. These remarkable skulls captured public imagination and were featured in adventure stories and popular films, presented as mysterious relics of lost wisdom or even evidence of alien visitation to Earth in ancient times. The skulls seem to glow with ancient and deeply otherworldly mystery. The real truth would eventually prove rather more recent and more mundane. Modern analysis has revealed that most crystal skulls were made in the 19th century. Scientific examination of the most famous crystal skulls using advanced electron microscopy has revealed unmistakable tool marks consistent with modern lapidary equipment, including rotary tools and fine polishing wheels that were certainly not available to pre-Columbian craftsmen, indicating that these artifacts were created by European artisans in the 19th century, probably in workshops in Germany that specialized in carving quartz, and then sold to collectors eager to acquire exotic relics from lost and mysterious civilizations. The revelation that the skulls are not actually ancient does not diminish their remarkable craftsmanship, but it transforms them from mysteries of the past into sobering lessons about how easily we can be fooled by our own desires. Quiet modern mysteries, ancient only in their deep longing to be believed. The Shroud of Turin has been venerated as a holy relic for centuries. Preserved in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, is a linen cloth bearing the faint but unmistakable image of a man who appears to have been crucified, venerated by many Christians as the burial shroud of Jesus Christ, displaying what they believe to be the miraculous imprint left by his body after death and resurrection. The shroud has been displayed to pilgrims, hidden during wars, nearly destroyed by fire, and subjected to intense scientific scrutiny by researchers around the world. Yet its true origins remain a matter of faith and continued controversy, with believers pointing to extraordinary features that seem impossible to replicate and skeptics seeking more mundane explanations. The image shows wounds consistent with those described in biblical accounts of the crucifixion, a piece of linen, wrapped around centuries of devotion and doubt. Carbon dating places the Shroud of Turin in the medieval period. In 1988, 3 independent laboratories using radiocarbon dating methods analyzed small samples taken from the Shroud of Turin and concluded with high confidence that the linen fabric was produced between 1260 and 1390 of the Common Era, during the medieval period, roughly 1,000 years too late to be the genuine burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. This result suggested that the shroud was a medieval creation, perhaps a carefully painted image created by a supremely skilled artist or a clever forgery created to serve as a religious relic. and seemed to settle the question of its authenticity for much of the scientific community. However, questions about the sampling methodology have prevented this conclusion from being universally accepted. The radiocarbon tests pointed clearly to medieval origins. But the remarkably vigorous debate about the shroud continues to this day. Some researchers argue the dating tests were flawed. Critics of the 1988 radiocarbon dating have argued that the samples tested may have been taken from a repaired section of the cloth that was contaminated with medieval thread, that fire damage and handling over the centuries introduced carbon that skewed the results toward a later date, or that the testing protocols themselves were insufficient to account for the shroud's unique history, and they point to other evidence, including pollen from plants native to the Middle East. Bloodstains that appear consistent with crucifixion wounds and photographic analyses as supporting an earlier origin. The debate between believers and skeptics continues unresolved, with neither side fully persuaded by the other's evidence. New scientific techniques may eventually provide clearer answers, but for now, the shroud remains suspended between faith and forensics, contested dates and contested interpretations, a mystery that simply refuses to be settled. The iron pillar of Delhi has resisted rust for over 1,600 years. Standing proudly in the courtyard of the Qutub complex in Delhi, India, is a pillar of solid iron over 7 meters tall and weighing over 6 tons, erected around the 5th century of the Common Era during the reign of the Gupta dynasty. And despite being exposed to the monsoon climate and open elements for over 1,600 years, it shows remarkably little rust or corrosion. A remarkable feat of metallurgy that has long puzzled scientists who expected such old iron to have deteriorated far more severely. The pillar's remarkable resistance to rust was once attributed to mystical properties or ancient lost technologies, but modern metallurgical analysis has revealed more earthly explanations rooted in chemistry, a pillar that defied time, its long-held secret now finally understood. The composition of the pillar creates a protective layer that prevents corrosion. Detailed metallurgical analysis of the Delhi iron pillar has revealed that its unusual and remarkable resistance to rust results from a high phosphorus content in the iron, combined with exceptionally low sulfur levels, a specific composition that causes a thin but effective protective layer of iron hydrogen phosphate to form naturally on the surface, effectively sealing the metal from the oxygen and moisture that typically cause corrosion in ordinary iron. This protective layer builds up gradually over centuries of wet and dry monsoon cycles, growing more effective with age, a result of the specific ore and traditional smelting techniques used by ancient Indian metallurgists rather than any deliberate anti-corrosion strategy they understood. Ancient skill creating unexpected chemistry, a protection they did not even fully know they had created. The stone spheres of Costa Rica were carved with remarkable precision. Scattered across the lush Diquis Delta region of Costa Rica are hundreds of extraordinarily precise stone spheres ranging in size from a few centimeters to over 2 meters in diameter, carved from dense granodiorite and gabbro with a precision that has long amazed observers and archaeologists alike, some so perfectly round that their dedicated original creators must have possessed extraordinary skill and patience to achieve such remarkable geometric symmetry using only primitive stone tools. The spheres were made by the pre-Columbian Diquis culture between roughly 200 and 1,500 years ago, though many were disturbed from their original positions and careful arrangements during banana plantation development in the 20th century. Perfect spheres carved from imperfect tools. Remarkable skill measured wholly in roundness alone. And now, as these final mysteries gather in the stillness, let yourself be carried by the questions rather than the answers. Breathe slowly. Let your jaw unclench. Let your eyelids grow heavy. You are safe here among the unsolved wonders of the world. No one knows why the Costa Rican spheres were made or how they were shaped so perfectly. Despite decades of careful study and painstaking investigation by archaeologists from around the world, the purpose of the Costa Rican stone spheres remains frustratingly unknown, with theories ranging from astronomical markers to status symbols of powerful chiefs to elements of a lost game or ceremony. And while experiments have shown that they could have been shaped through a combination of controlled fracture, pecking with harder stones, and grinding with sand, the exact techniques used by the Diquis craftsmen and the meaning they attached to their spherical creations may never be fully understood. The civilization that made them did not survive the Spanish conquest, and whatever oral traditions explained the spheres were lost with them. Perfect shapes without explanation, round stones keeping their own counsel. The Cochino stone in Scotland is covered in carvings whose meaning is lost. Near the village of Clydebank in West Dunbartonshire lies a large flat rock measuring about 13 by 8 meters, covered with intricate cup and ring marks, spirals, geometric patterns, and other carefully carved symbols that date back roughly 5,000 years to the Neolithic or early Bronze Age, making it one of the finest and most complete examples of prehistoric rock art in all of Europe. Yet despite its prominence and the clarity of its carvings, no one knows what the symbols meant to the people who made them. The stone was buried in 1965 to protect it from vandalism and only partially re-excavated in 2016 for study. Researchers used modern scanning technology to create detailed digital records of every carved mark on the ancient surface. A stone covered in ancient marks. 5,000 years of silence. Cup and ring marks appear on stones across the world, but their purpose is unknown. From Scotland and Ireland to Spain and Portugal, from India to Australia to the American Southwest, ancient peoples carved distinctive patterns of circular depressions and concentric rings into rock surfaces, creating remarkably similar designs despite being separated by vast continents and many millennia. A strange and unexplained phenomenon that has led to theories ranging from maps of stars or settlements to spiritual symbols representing journeys or altered states of consciousness to simple doodles made by bored herders over countless generations. The widespread distribution of cup and ring marks suggests either independent invention by different cultures or perhaps some deep-seated human impulse to create these particular shapes, careful circles carved into stone. A strange pattern that somehow crosses oceans and ages. The plain of Jars in Laos contains thousands of stone vessels of unknown origin. Scattered across the Xingquang Plateau in central Laos are thousands of megalithic stone jars, some over 3 meters tall and weighing several tons each, carved from sandstone, granite, limestone, and other local rocks between roughly 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, their original purpose lost to the mists of time and their creators unknown beyond the archaeological culture that has been named after them. Most researchers believe the jars were associated with burial practices, perhaps holding bodies during decomposition or storing the cremated remains of the dead, but the exact rituals they served remain a matter of speculation. Stone vessels on a quiet highland plain, ancient containers for something we can no longer name. Local legends say the jars held rice wine for giants. The indigenous peoples of the Xingquang region have their own vivid explanation for the mysterious stone vessels that dot their landscape, telling stories of a race of powerful giants who once inhabited the plateau long ago and carved the jars to brew and store vast quantities of rice wine, Lao Hai, with which they celebrated a great military victory, a legend that gives poetic meaning to objects whose true purpose has been forgotten. Whether these stories preserve some fragment of actual tradition from the jar makers or were created later to explain monuments that had become enigmatic, they remind us that mysteries invite stories and that stories themselves become part of the mystery. Every culture creates narratives to explain the inexplicable objects left behind by those who came before. Giants drinking wine, a legend perhaps nearly as old as the forgetting. And from these final scattered wonders, we turn to the deepest question of all. Why do we find comfort in mysteries? The Inca used knotted cords called quipu to record information. The mighty Inca Empire, which stretched along the western coast of South America and high into the Andes Mountains during the 15th and early 16th centuries, developed a unique and remarkably sophisticated system of recording information using quipu, elaborate assemblages of dyed-colored cords with knots tied at various intervals, used by trained specialists called quipucamiocs to track census data, tribute payments, military resources, calendar events, and perhaps even narrative histories. The system was sophisticated enough to administer one of the largest empires in the pre-Columbian Americas, yet after the Spanish conquest, knowledge of how to create and properly read quipu was actively suppressed and eventually lost to time. Some researchers believe that narrative quipu may have recorded histories, myths, and poetry alongside numerical data, knots that once held an empire together, now silent strings waiting to be understood. No one fully understands how to read a quipu today. Despite intensive academic study spanning many decades by scholars and researchers around the world, researchers have only partially decoded the information encoded in surviving quipu. Understanding that knot positions on the cords represent numbers in a decimal system, but struggling to interpret the significance of chord colors, the arrangement of subsidiary chords, and complex patterns that may well represent non-numerical information, such as names, places, important events, or even narrative histories. Roughly 1,000 quipu survive in museums and private collections around the world, tantalizing evidence of Inca administrative genius and sophistication, yet without a Rosetta Stone key or living tradition to guide interpretation, their full meaning remains locked away in knots and colors. 1,000 carefully and precisely knotted records, a language of string still largely mute and waiting. The purpose of the Sanxingdui bronze masks discovered in China remains unknown. In 1986, farmers digging irrigation channels in Sichuan province unearthed 2 massive sacrificial pits containing thousands of precious artifacts from a previously unknown and remarkably sophisticated civilization dating to roughly 1,200 years before the Common Era, including large bronze masks with features unlike anything found in early Chinese art, finely worked jade objects, delicate gold ornaments, and elephant tusks. All apparently ritually burned and carefully buried around the time the civilization mysteriously ended. The discovery of Sanxingdui revolutionized understanding of ancient China, proving that sophisticated Bronze Age cultures existed far outside the Yellow River heartland, yet the people who created these extraordinary objects left no surviving written records that we can read. An unknown and forgotten civilization, masks staring from the darkness of archaeology. The figures have bulging eyes and features unlike any known Chinese art. The most striking of the Sanxingdui bronzes are large masks with dramatically protruding, almost tubular eyes that extend far beyond the face, pointed ears, and haunting expressions that seem both human and otherworldly, features that have no parallel in the artistic traditions of the Shang dynasty or other known contemporary Chinese cultures, and have led to widespread speculation about their meaning, whether they represent deities, ancestors, or humans transformed by ritual into something beyond ordinary perception. Some researchers suggest the bulging eyes may have been designed to hold separate pupils of jade or other materials, while others interpret the exaggeration as a way of depicting supernatural vision or altered states of consciousness. Eyes that see beyond the normal, faces from a forgotten and vanished mythology. The civilization that made the Sangsingdui bronzes vanished without explanation. Around 1200 years before the Common Era, the Sangsingdui civilization appears to have come to an abrupt and deeply mysterious end, with its precious treasures deliberately destroyed and carefully buried in sacrificial pits before the people moved away or dispersed into the surrounding countryside, and no written records have been found to explain what happened, whether devastating war, catastrophic flood, epidemic, or some internal upheaval caused the sudden collapse of this remarkable culture. Some of the population may have migrated to nearby Jinsha, where similar bronzes have been found, but the Sangsingdui site itself was abandoned and eventually forgotten until its accidental rediscovery by farmers in the 20th century. A civilization that burned its treasures and walked away. We still do not know where they went. History is full of gaps that may never be filled. For every civilization whose story we know in detail, there are countless others that left behind only ruins and scattered artifacts, their languages unreadable, their beliefs unknowable, their daily lives a matter of speculation based on pottery shards and crumbling foundation stones. And for every document that somehow survived through the centuries and reached us, countless others were lost to fire, flood, rot, conquest, and the simple passage of time, leaving holes in the historical record that no amount of dedicated archaeological ingenuity can fully repair. The past is not a complete narrative, but a fragment, a page torn from a larger book, a few sentences from a conversation that lasted for millennia. What we call history is merely the portion that managed to survive the long journey from then to now. We know only what survived by chance. The rest has quietly returned to silence. Each unsolved mystery is a reminder of how much we have forgotten. Every undeciphered script, every lost city, every ancient artifact whose purpose we cannot determine stands as a quiet and lasting monument to all the precious knowledge that has vanished between then and now, reminding us that our ancestors were not simpler versions of ourselves, but were in fact complex peoples with their own sophisticated philosophies, technologies, and ways of understanding the world that we may never fully recover. The mysteries are not failures of the distant past, but failures of transmission, broken links in a chain of knowledge that once stretched unbroken from teacher to student, from parent to child, from one generation to the next, across the countless centuries. We are left holding fragments of conversations we can no longer fully understand. What they knew is mostly gone. What remains are only these quiet riddles. The ancient world still holds secrets waiting to be discovered. Despite centuries of exploration and excavation, vast portions of the ancient world remain unstudied, with lost cities sleeping beneath jungles, shipwrecks lying on the ocean floor, tombs sealed in desert rock, and archives buried under the foundations of modern cities, all waiting for the chance discoveries and systematic investigations that will bring them back to light. Every year brings new finds, from undiscovered chambers in known pyramids to entire civilizations whose existence was previously unsuspected, reminding us that the past is not closed but still unfolding, still capable of surprising us with revelations about who we were and how we came to be who we are. Modern technology, like ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery, continues to reveal sites that remained hidden for millennia beneath forests and sand. There are still secrets left to find. The ancient world is not finished sharing its stories. And with that, the mysteries of the ancient world grow quiet. From pyramids aligned to the stars to manuscripts no one can read. From cities swallowed by legend to statues gazing out across empty oceans. From tombs that have never been opened to figures whose names may never be known. We have wandered through 1,000 years of questions and found that the questions themselves are a kind of comfort. If this journey brought you a moment of peace, consider passing it on to another sleepy soul. A like, a subscription, a quiet word to someone who might need rest. Each small act helps this corner of the night grow a little larger. There are more wonders waiting in the shadows of history, more mysteries to explore when sleep feels far away. Right now, as you lie here in the stillness, the ancient stones still stand beneath the stars. Somewhere, an undeciphered text waits in a museum drawer. Somewhere, a lost city sleeps beneath the sand. The mysteries continue their vigil, patient as they have always been, waiting for someone to find them. Let your breath become slow and steady, like the turning of centuries. If your eyes feel heavy, let them close. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears, let your hands uncurl, let your whole body sink into the surface beneath you. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing you need to solve. Tonight, as you rest, the ancient world continues its quiet existence. The pyramids stand in the desert under the same stars that watched them rise. The Moai gaze across the Pacific, as they have for hundreds of years. Somewhere beneath the earth, unopened tombs keep their secrets in perfect darkness. Life carries on among the ruins, while you sleep, peacefully resting among the unsolved wonders of history. Sleep well, sweet dreams, and may you carry with you the quiet knowledge that not everything needs an answer, and that the unanswered questions of the past can be a kind of lullaby. This has been Drowsy Discovery. Good night.